There wasn't a single team with more excitement around them last offseason than the New York Jets. That's just what happens when you go out and trade for one of the most talented quarterbacks in NFL history, Aaron Rodgers. Oh, it was supposed to be so special, and Rodgers was supposed to help turn around a pretty talented offense, but it didn't go that way. He ruptured his Achilles on just the 4th offensive snap, ending his season. There was the long hope of maybe him returning if the Jets made the playoffs, but not only did that not happen, but he still had to rehab. All the while, Zach Wilson struggled on the field as Trevor Siemian and Tim Boyle found themselves as starters too. It was just messy, and now Wilson, the once crazy draft riser taken 2nd overall, was traded to the Broncos for just a pick swap. Not necessarily ideal. There's no more Wilson getting to learn behind Rodgers. It's just Rodgers. But the Jets did go out and make sure they had a good plan to back him up. Really, it's just been a good retool offseason for the Jets. Nothing very flashy at all, but take in mind, this is a roster that was expected to be really good last year. They just didn't have good quarterback play once Rodgers went down. And it's just so hard to win without a good quarterback in today's game. If the belief is still truly there for Rodgers, which is kind of hard to say, he's 40 coming off of an Achilles injury, the Jets should be fine. Especially if he's still that dude that was so good for so long in Green Bay and won 4 MVPs. But even if he isn't up to that same extreme standard, Rodgers should be fine, especially with that really good roster that's still around him. The Jets' 2023 roster was really good, one that could have won, especially with Rodgers at quarterback. The hope now is that they're going to be even better. When you look back at the Jets last season and the Rodgers injury, offensive line was a big problem. A problem that GM Joe Douglas immediately tried to fix this offseason. The Jets signed 3 important offensive linemen. The big name is really Tyron Smith. He played for the Cowboys for 13 years and was really good. He was a Pro Bowler for 8 seasons, but hasn't been since 2021. He's missed 37 games over the past 4 seasons, but is coming off of being a second-team All-Pro. It's just a 1-year deal and a bit of a gamble, but if he does stay healthy, he should be good. But again, that's a big if. At the other tackle spot, it's going to be Morgan Moses. He played for the Jets back in 2021, and I just want to say, shout out Morgan. He's a Richmond guy just like me. Shout out RVA. He's been with the Ravens for 2 years and was in Washington for a long time after he went to UVA, which is right up the road from me. New left guard John Simpson is the other signing, and also another former Raven. He started every game in Baltimore last season and got a 2-year, $18 million deal. The line should be much better, and it's nice to see that Joe Douglas went ahead and got that taken care of. The other big signing on the offense was wide receiver Mike Williams. He's only 29, but is coming off of tearing his ACL last season. He was once a high pick, but has only churned out 2 1,000-yard seasons in his 7-year career. He did have 249 yards in only 2 3/4 games last year before he got hurt, so there is some concern, but he could be a good big target for Rodgers. On the other side of the ball, the splash on defense was definitely Hassan Reddick. He was just a straight dog in Philadelphia. He's had at least 11 sacks in his last 4 seasons, dating back to his time with the Cardinals and Panthers, including a career-high 16 sacks in 2022 with the Eagles. One of the other big defensive signings that I really like was Javon Kinlaw. It's just a 1-year deal, but the interior of that defensive line needed the help. He was a disappointment as a first-round pick, sort of like Solomon Thomas was too, who the Jets brought back. There's a big connection to Robert Saleh there. Obviously, he was the old 49ers defensive coordinator. The last signing I feel like I have to bring up is, yes, a backup, Tyrod Taylor. He's been the backup for the other New York team for 2 years, and now he gets to switch lockers at MetLife. He's experienced with 58 career starts in his 13-year career. If something were to happen to Rodgers, at least the Jets have a backup option not named Zach Wilson. The Jets have made their offseason intentions really clear, both in free agency and at the draft. Improve the offense. That was a priority in free agency and at the draft too. The Jets did have 7 picks at the draft, but it wasn't one in every round. They actually had 5 compensatory 5th-round picks. They used their first 5 picks all on offense. The big one was 11th overall. The offensive line was a big issue last year, so they addressed it in free agency and at the draft, taking Olu Fashanu out of Penn State State. He was a 4-year guy at PSU and was a consensus All-American last season. He's been fantastic in college and definitely has all the tools to translate over to the pros. In the third round, the Jets took Malachi Corey, a wide receiver out of Western Kentucky. He's essentially the third guy on the depth chart already. He had 1,300 yards in 2022 and is coming off of back-to-back 11 touchdown seasons where he was first team All-CUSA. With their fourth rounder, they went running back Braylon Allen. Shout out to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, by the way. This dude is only 20 years old. I mean, he won't even be able to legally drink until after his rookie regular season, which is kind of wild. He had 3,500 yards and 35 touchdowns in 3 seasons at Wisconsin, and he was second team All-Big Ten all 3 years. The Jets followed it up with another running back in the next round, Isaiah Davis out of South Dakota State. He won 2 FCS national championships. It was just a Missouri Valley Conference Co-Offensive Player of the Year and a first-team FCS All-American. The Jets should be set at running back, and in between those two, they took quarterback Jordan Travis out of Florida State. Travis actually spent 6 years in college, the first coming at Louisville. He's been at FSU since before COVID and just won ACC Player of the Year in a season that he suffered that leg injury that ended his collegiate career and FSU's chances at making the college football playoff. He was great. 2,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, and 7 rushing touchdowns. Finally, the last 2 guys were defense, corner Quantez Stiggers in the 5th round, and safety Jalen Kay in the 7th. Stiggers actually got drafted out of the Canadian Football League and played in fan-controlled football before that. He, funny enough, never played college ball. Then Jalen Kay was the storied Mr. Irrelevant. He played at UAB for 5 years and spent last season at Alabama. The Jets had a good draft. Plain and simple. They filled the holes that they needed to, and the future is bright, but it might not last long. The Jets are really good, and they're even better now. This is a team that could end up having a great season, and I could see even playing in February, but it feels like they need to get this done now. They need to win now. The single biggest reason is obviously Aaron Rodgers. The Jets traded for him for a reason, and it was time for the Packers to move on to Jordan Love, so it just made sense for them. But there's a big elephant in the room, the fact that Rodgers is 40 years old. He's going to turn 41 during this season, and he's coming off of a torn Achilles. Now, this isn't the last year of his contract. It actually runs out after the 2025 season, so it's very possible the Jets have a 2-year window to try to win it all before he retires and goes into politics or just endlessly screaming into the void in a dark room. He'll be 42 years old when his deal expires, and the Jets are probably going to have to refigure out the position that they just can't figure out. Luckily, they do have some good young pieces that are going to stay around for a while. Garrett Wilson and Sauce Gardner are obviously the big names that the Jets will hope stay in town for a long time. It's pretty weird because the Jets should hopefully be good, but the long-term core doesn't really involve the most important player on the roster, which is Rodgers. They have to win a Super Bowl fast. I mean, if they're going to win one at all. Luckily, it should be a bit easier with the Bills having a pretty tough offseason and the Patriots being just, I hate having to say this, ass. But the Dolphins also had a pretty good offseason and are still going to be very good. There's a lot riding on these next 2 seasons for the Jets and Aaron Rodgers. The reality is, he's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer no matter what. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks in league history. But man, he'd sure like to add another ring before he hangs him up.